if you want to share it for training purposes or what have you. So I'm Marie Henselder-Kimmel. I'm the chapter leader of Tri-County American Promise. And Vicki, you want to wave, Vicki? Let's bring Vicki up. There's Vicki. Vicki is my co-host tonight. And then of course, most people got to say hello to Sam on the way in to the Zoom. So Vicki and I are going to be co-hosts, and we're going to have discussion with Sam about his book, Reclaiming Our Democracy. Sam founded the anti-poverty citizen lobby Results in 1980. He founded Civic Courage in 2012 to coach citizen advocacy organizations on best strategies to empower citizen action. Sam coached American Promise on structuring its citizen advocacy model at the beginning of its establishment back in 2016, 2017. And he has coached Citizens Climate Lobby, which has been an establishment a bit longer. Sam, how long? Do you remember?
13 years.
13 years now for Citizens Climate Lobby and FCNL, and currently Catholic Relief Services. The 20th anniversary edition of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Healing the Break Between People and Government was published in 2014. And most of us who were trained at the very beginning with the chapter's formation back in 2017 and 2018 did get a good taste of Sam's teachings at that time. So thanks so much for joining us, Sam, tonight. Let me just put up a slide with an agenda for us. Is that showing up okay?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, great. So tonight we just went through our welcome. We're going to do a breakout session. Sam's going to do a presentation for us, and then Vicki and I are going to go through some excerpts with Sam and talk about some of the main messages that we want to get to tonight. And then we should have a good 30 minutes for Q&A. We have scheduled through 9:30. If we get through the discussion sooner than that, we'll certainly end. If people feel like they need to leave, before the very end, then we understand. But we are going to present also a challenge for personal action that we would like to have you all take before our next session when we meet again on Wednesday, December 2nd. And you'll automatically get the reminder and Zoom links for that. If you have people that you want who couldn't make this session, but you think would be interested in joining us for the second session, certainly share the link with them, and we'll get get a copy to them as well of the current recording. So there are some people on the call who are not members of American Promise, so I wanted to really briefly describe who we are. American Promise is a cross-partisan nonprofit organization to empower citizen advocacy action in all 50 states to pass the 28th Amendment to get big money out of politics so that we, the people, not money, not super PACs, not corporations, govern. And the key ideals are, the three core beliefs are that only humans have constitutional rights, legal tools like corporations and unions and so on do not. All citizens are equal. Citizens vote, dollars do not. Somebody has a dog in the background. Can everybody mute themselves? And together we govern, unless we do not. And we believe, and so we act. So that's what we're about. So what we would like to do is, at this point, let me unshare my screen. I just want to share something that how I got to American Promise. Basically, Sam was instrumental in how I got to American Promise. I am a retired OBGYN, and I had been deeply concerned about the influence of money and the corrupting effects of money in politics on healthcare policy for years as a physician. And after the 2016 elections, I decided I had to become more civically engaged. And I attended rallies and I reached out and looked at different organizations, but I really wanted to join an organization that was going to make some significant effect on the effect of money in politics. And I wanted to join an organization, that had a proven strategy and a structure to do that. So I did attend a talk by Sam at a nearby library that my friend, who was the librarian there, had arranged. And by the end of the evening, Listening to Sam about his model of civic engagement, I was so inspired that I decided that night to investigate launching a chapter of American Promise with my friend, the librarian, who is Joan DeVore, who unfortunately is not with us tonight, but she's the co-leader of our group, Tri-County. I bought a copy of Sam's book that night, and he inscribed it, "With gratitude for your passion for a vibrant democracy and a healthy nation and world." 3 months later, we launched our chapter in July of 2017. And here I am 3.5 years later as an American Promise chapter leader and hosting Sam in our discussion tonight to share his message of inspiration about effective citizen advocacy with our members to help us reinvigorate our dedication and our viewpoint about our advocacy. I'd like to have Vicki introduce and give her a little more background on herself and also share why we're doing what we're doing tonight.
Well, I'm Vicki Barnes, and I'm the Minnesota State Coordinator for American Promise. I actually started working on the amendment in 2013 when I was living in Wisconsin, and when I moved here in 2015, couldn't really find a home in American Promise when they started in 2016. That was the home for me. I liked the way they were not a top-down organization. Whatever worked for your state, they would support you, and that they were cross-partisan. So the question is, why this book and why now? Well, Sam's book's not only a model for successful advocacy, it is empowering through the sharing of personal experiences and becoming an agent of change. After this contentious election, in fact, after these last 4 tumultuous years, we all, regardless of political leanings, need a reset. So let's start over again and rebuild our movement. I want you to remember the power you have and multiply that power by the thousands of others that want the same change. Realize that when you contact a lawmaker, you have the support of all of us. When you submit your letter to the editor, you do so for all of us, and we're doing the same for you. Feel that support, feel that power. We hope that reading this book and participating in these discussions will help you remember that although an amendment is a pretty big deal, you have the power to make it happen. You've got this. Marie?
Thanks, Vicki. So I think we're here for the most part because we agree that mouse click activism of Facebook posts and signing petitions is not very effective in achieving change, and it's not personally satisfying either. And gaining a constitutional amendment is a multi-year project, as those of us who have been in it for a few years already know, and those who have gotten involved more recently, understand the time frame that we're hoping, for ratification in the Congress by 2024, and then back to the states, and hopefully with our work done by 2026, ratification by the states. So we have several years ahead of us as yet. So we're going to get you off the sidelines right away, and we're going to have you participate in a breakout session to start off our evening. We're going to be sending you into, I'm going to put the, I'm going to put the slide up for a minute again. We're going to have 3 people in each breakout and about 4 minutes to discuss these 2 questions. And just please indicate, the 3 of you decide which of the 3 participants is going to take a few notes so that when we come back, if you guys feel like you've had something interesting to say that you want to share with the rest of us, you can do so. One person will do that. So the first question is, what is your state of mind right now? Do you feel hopeful, depressed, energized, stuck, or something else? And it can have everything to do with our advocacy work, with the election, with COVID, just in general, what's your state of mind? And question number 2 is, what do you hope to get out of this book club session? Okay, I'm going to put these in the chat, so you should be able to see them when you're in your breakout rooms. But here we go. You're going to go off into breakout rooms. We'll see you, and we'll give you a little warning right before the time is up. So. Bye.
All right, there we go. Turn the microphone back on.
Hello. So we should have, so let me do this. Great. So we have Charlotte and Charlotte, can you take your microphone on, please? Unmute yourself. And I'm not sure who's at the American Promise. Is it Louise, maybe? American Promise, Kansas City? We have a third person with us who doesn't have their microphone on rather. Not joined. Hi, Charlotte. I'm Marie.
Hi,
How are you?
How are
And
you?
Remind me where you're from?
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. Okay, and you're with excuse me, with Ishwari?
Ishwari.
Yeah, with
Right.
Ishwari, yeah.
Right, and I had some problems with the ebook that I got from Amazon.
Okay.
I couldn't follow the page numbers. There
Oh.
are no page numbers. It's just weird.
Oh, you know what? I wasn't thinking about like what the place locations were. I can probably try to go back. Sam had put the page numbers down, but I can probably try to go back and line them up with the locations.
Okay,
And
and
the-
I was trying to just even search for your keywords, and it still wouldn't pull up the proper page. So I didn't know how to find them. And so I didn't get a chance to read any of it because I started out with just the introduction and just kind of got frustrated and felt that I was never going to be able to get through
Okay.
enough
this
to be
particular-
effective in the meetings.
Yeah, well, this is actually, this session has a lot to do with, we're going to do a little bit of reading. If you got to read the op-ed that I forwarded in a separate email, Sam had an op-ed that was published yesterday and
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, okay. I had sent it in a separate email, but in any case, you're not reading tonight. It's not going to be a problem. And when you read through, you'll be able to just, you'll be able to catch up. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you've had some of the training with the New Mexico American Promise chapter, you probably have heard a few of these things. It's just that we found that a lot of the chapters hadn't gone over it very much, and we thought that maybe it would be helpful for people to get a review. And I know myself, just reading the book again was pretty invigorating.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to the time. So, how are you feeling? What's your state of mind these days?
Well, I'm hopeful, but it's still very frustrating because you never know what to expect out of the White House.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's something that I think was not unexpected, but it's frustrating in that they aren't doing anything to make it, to force it to be what it's supposed to be, and so it just slows the ball down for anybody that's coming in to be able to pick up right away, because there's a lot to do before you ever say, you put your hand on that Bible,
Mhm. Yeah,
So
I know it's frustrating. I mean, I think that probably they're going to have to let a few things play out before they push a little bit harder. But how about personally in terms of, like doing advocacy work, reaching out for, I know Ishwari said actually, isn't it tonight? There's actually a resolution that's being voted upon. I don't know if you've had
in Los Alamos, I
that.
believe.
Yeah. Have you felt sort of frustrated by the polarization that it feels like we're not getting much done, or have you still been hopeful?
Well, it's the COVID has really placed a lot of, it's just not the same whenever you're not in person.
Hold on 1 second. I have to broadcast to everybody. They have a minute left.
Okay, go ahead.
I think. I didn't expect to actually be put in a room. So.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. It's the way the software goes. I thought that as the host, I wouldn't be assigned, but it's fine. I love to talk to people. I just was not expecting to be.
Did you still need to break in to tell them that they're?
No, I already did. No, I already did that. I sent a message that should tell them. We'll see.
because I didn't see anything
I didn't
personally.
see anything, but I don't know, but maybe that's because I'm here.
You can get out of this chat room if you want and breakout room
Yeah.
and just
let me
tend to business there if you want,
go back
Marie.
and see which room I'm in. I have 2 that are unassigned. Okay, well, they're just going to move. I'll leave it. All right. That should have gone through. And then in terms of what are you hoping to get out of the session?
Well, I'm just, I wanted to get an idea, like of what the gist is of the topic, and hopefully be able to reference the things that we're supposed to be reading, but eventually to read the whole book. But it
Yeah.
was frustrating being,
Yeah.
the ebook was not following the hard copy book.
Yeah. All right. Well, let us get back to get everybody back
Okay.
to this main session. So actually by doing that, it gave 60 seconds. So we have people back. Well, that's fine. People will just be coming back.
Did that happen with everybody or just some people?
It was mostly, was it 2s or 3s?
It was 3. It was supposed to be 3s, but I think there were some 2s. Like we had a third person in ours who didn't join. I wasn't really expecting to be assigned to a chat room, and you probably weren't either, Sam, but that's fine. I mean, we get to, interact and do that. That's fine.
So I was in a chat room but got bumped out. Sometimes Zoom bumps me out, but I couldn't get back in. I've
Oh.
been waiting like several minutes
Sorry
now.
about that.
So I was in room 11, if that matters.
So we're missing people now. Are they still in their
Well,
rooms?
when I moved
Everybody
my
should be
cursor,
out.
it said leave room.
Yeah.
So it didn't, oh, now it's automatic.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So do we have, let's use, is everybody familiar with the hands up at the bottom of the participants? If you open your participants box, and then it has a something where it allows you to raise your hand. And if we can, if somebody wants to share what was discussed in their breakout room, I see Deb Freeman. Deb, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Deb.
Hi. I met with Herb, who felt confused, and Steve, who felt hopeful, and myself. I said that I'm just feeling inspired, and as far as what we want to get out of the group, it kind of narrowed down to more inspiration, more knowledge, and a better understanding of where we should be going.
Great, thanks. So we have, you can lower your hand if you want, Deb. I don't think we can do that. Judy Butler. Judy, yeah. Great.
Hi, I met with Kelly and Monica, and we were variously worried but hopeful, worried but still in election mode, and hoping to get out of the evening getting re-energized, stay engaged, looking for hopefulness, enjoy connecting with fellow sister and travelers after not seeing too many of you recently.
Yeah, it is nice to see some faces that we haven't seen in a while. Great, thanks for sharing, Judy. All right, well, we had 11 or 12 chat rooms, so we must have some more people who want to share what was discussed in their breakout session. Jean.
I meant to raise my hand. I don't know if I did, but
You did, Jean.
Okay, thanks. I met with Louise from Kansas City and Michael from Virginia. And our feelings were kind of overwhelmed and depressed with the situation going on, particularly with the election and so much divisiveness, but determined and hopeful at the same time. And the two of us have not read the book, just putting it out there. So, but Michael did, and he had a really good question. I think he should word it though, or save it for later. So
Yeah, if it's a question, let's save it for later. But and a lot of people didn't have a chance. But first of all, we had, and I thought this might happen because the election was last Tuesday, and most people didn't see the notification before the election. And then when I put out reminders the end of last week for the leaders to send out another reminder, I'm sure some people didn't really catch up with emails till over the weekend. So there wasn't time necessarily to read. But tonight, really, I think you'll all get a lot out of the discussion without having read. So don't worry about that. There'll be a chance to catch up with that before the second session. And why don't we hear from another Betsy? Betsy, you want to give us the comments from your?
Yeah, I met with Mark and Heather. Heather's from New Jersey. Mark is from Minnesota as I am, but Heather had a Minnesota connection. So right off the bat,
a small world.
Yes, as the saying goes. So some of the feelings we have were tired, but hoping. Some relief and gladness that the election turned out the way that it did, but also moving towards a need to understand others who we disagree with.
That's a really great, very important point. We all need to do that, especially in the advocacy work that we hope to achieve here. And then how about what you wanted to get out of tonight's session, Betsy?
I don't know that we got to that point.
Okay. There can be a lot of necessity of just unloading all the emotion that we've all been swamped in for the last little while here. And then, so Laura, thank you so much for sharing, Betsy. Laura, how about if we have you wrap up the feedback from the breakout sessions?
Sure. I'm from California, and I was with Sally Johnson from Minnesota, and Patricia Murphy got bumped out of our breakout session just as we were getting started.
Ah.
So the two of us we had a little bit of a glitch there, but there's a feeling definitely of being, discouraged that the election wasn't more strongly in one direction, which was a perception that would have made passage of the amendment in the future a little bit easier if the election had been, let's say, more strongly on the Democratic side, the outcome, and also a feeling that everyone has become more aggressive and polarized as the years have gone by. These last 4 years, that is more polarized than ever, which is hard. And I was actually I said I was a little more hopeful, but actually just anxious at this moment, not because of the way the election went, but because of all the discussions we're having about the transition now. Mm-hmm. So I'm so grateful we had a smooth, how on earth do we have a smooth election, voting without violence after the pandemic in this last year? And then we had this wait period, a long time, longest I can remember, waiting for the outcome. Actually was a time for simmering down, so no one's throwing wild parties, no blast of things that would also wind up in violence all in one moment to build up. So that covers tonight. But to get out of tonight, I would say Sally said for sure more hope, because she's not as familiar with the book. And I said, yes, you'll definitely get that. Okay. I'm looking for that too. I'm also looking to be reminded of the how to do it chapter, which I think is chapter 25 or 26, because the team aspects in the Zoom culture that we're now in for 8 or 9 months, since we're steeped in that, the situation is different, and to just look at that with fresh eyes is going to be a good thing.
Great. All right. Thanks for sharing, Laura. So let's move along because we want to get through the presentation and the discussion and have plenty of time for Q&A. So Sam, how about if we have you start your presentation?
Okay, great. Hi, everyone, again. It's great to be here. I want to thank Laura and Ishwari and Vicky and Marie. And I want to say that Laura, I don't know if she drove an hour and a half or 2 hours down to the Burlington Public Library to table for American Promise 4 years ago and was there to talk to Marie. And so tabling is good. You end up talking to folks like Marie. And let's see, Vicky and Marie and I spoke for 2.5 hours on Sunday to work together on this too. So thanks for all that time we've put in. So here's the deal. This is a presentation that I do. You could call it a Cliff's Notes update on the essence of reclaiming our democracy. I did it 25 times last year. And so I'm going to do this presentation, but I'm also going to, from time to time, just tell you what I'm doing. So first of all, the title. The title of this talk is, Are Shouting and Silence Our Only Two Options? Using bipartisanship and transformation to become better citizen advocates. And I'm always saying that I'm thinking of renaming it Our Shouting, Silence, and Signing Online Petitions, Our Only Three Options, bringing bipartisanship and transformation to citizen activism. And I always do this, and I want you to see what I'm doing. I always do my story of self. This is something developed by Marshall Gans, a Harvard professor who was worked with Cesar Chavez 50 years ago for a decade in California. And the story of self is basically what happened in your life, not everything, but what are some things that happened in your life and what decisions did you make about that got you to here? You're on this call. How did you get on or into your American Promise chapter or to this call? So here's my story of self. What happened in my life? What decisions did I make that got me here? So I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music. And I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And 40 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results. And a lot of times, music poverty lobby, what's the connection and what was the motivation for that change? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that started pointing me in a different direction. I graduated from high school in 1964, and I played timpani. I always think people are doing the calculation in their head. And I played timpani in the orchestra at the graduation. And just before the ceremony, a flute player came back to the percussion section and told me that a high school fraternity brother of mine had died the day before in a tractor trailer accident in Georgia. It was her next door neighbor, so she knew about it before I did. I always say I was 17. When I was 17, mortality was an irrelevant concept. But, you know, it was like maybe I had 17 more minutes or months or years. And so I started to ask the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? 4 years later, 1968, college graduation, June of that year, Robert Kennedy's assassinated right in the days around college graduation. It was another, what is this life? What is this death? Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? No answer. But the question's getting clearer. 9 years later, 1977, I always say I'm a little slow. I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger, put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this thing thinking, well, hunger is inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I mean, I say it's inevitable because there are no solutions, because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. So this is like, I know how ordinary people think, because that's certainly where I started. So I went to this thing. It was obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food or clean water or basic health. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature, people. We'll just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions: why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I speak to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom by classroom. And before I walk into the first classroom, I read some statements from the US National Academy of Sciences, Food and Nutrition Study, and others calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote him. I don't want to know if you met him, just the name. And you might come off mute if you've never heard this story before and you want to guess how many out of 7,000 knew the name of their member of Congress. 200. Fewer than 3%. 6,800 didn't. Just over 97% could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results started out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. Now I'm going to share my screen right now, and it's going to take me a moment to, oh my gosh, what happened? Hold on. Okay. And I'm going to, sorry. Okay, great. So I'm going to start with the main messages of my talk. And this is a talk for newbies, beginners. And I know you're not beginners, but as I always say, I want you to see what I say to beginners. So here's my talk. The main messages: you can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. I'm going to demonstrate that in a moment. You can make a profound difference on big issues. Number two, to my newbies, you probably haven't, because of your sense of powerlessness and resignation about politics, especially federal politics. And message number three, if, big word, if you find an organization that's committed to dissolving the powerlessness, you can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. So here's my first example. I'm going to take a little more time on my second. Results volunteers, this is, you can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. We started lobbying in the early 80s on child survival. In the early 80s, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, was reporting that 41,000 children around the world were dying every day from largely preventable malnutrition and disease, things like measles coupled with malnutrition. And Results volunteers lobbied every year, 87, 88, 92, 90, every year, 2003, 2004, this year, last year, not only on this, but every year for a short period at the beginning of the year. The latest report from UNICEF is that the 41,000 child deaths a day has fallen to 14,520. Now, COVID will likely cause that to spike, but you can see that there a profound difference is being made. 7 years ago, in a New York Times article, former Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF, Kul Gautam, was quoted as saying, quote, "To a great extent, it was because of the receptivity created by Results that US funding for child survival increased so dramatically, and that led many other countries to come on board." Now I'm going to do one more of this, you can make a profound difference, and I may cut other things later, but I really want to zero in on this. I'm looking at this program at the bottom. I hope you can even see my cursor, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. Along with its partners, the Global Fund has saved 38 million lives since 2010, 2002 when it was founded. And last year, the US funded 1/3 of the Global Fund's funding. Last year, the US funded $1.35 billion, and it was up for a 3-year funding replenishment. And whatever the US did was going to give a signal to Britain and Germany and France and Australia and Canada. Well, President Trump called for a 29% cut for this year. Now, and so this is a you can make a profound difference section again. So results volunteers led, they weren't the only ones, but at the grassroots level, they led in getting 157 Republicans and Democrats in the House to sign one letter to the top House appropriators, and 36 Republicans and senators, Democrats in the Senate to sign another letter to Senate appropriators, and getting 137 Republicans and Democrats in Congress to sign one letter to Mike Pompeo, and getting 159 Republicans and Democrats in the House to co-sponsor a House resolution and 21 to co-sponsor a Senate resolution. Now, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to demonstrate what I'm doing here. I want to get it out of the head, and I want to get it into the heart. I want to get it out of the 1.35 billion, the 29% cut, and the 157 signers, and get it a bit more in the heart. And I'm going to read an excerpt from a book, Race Against Time, by Stephen Lewis, who is Kofi Annan's special envoy for AIDS in Africa. He published this book in 2005. So this is 15 years ago when AIDS was raging through Africa. He talks about grandmothers who are taking care of their grandchildren because their own children and their spouses have died. And then he gets to the section I'm going to read where it's sibling-headed households, where there are no grandparents or other relatives to care for the children. So the oldest child is taking care of the children. And this is from the book, quote, "In this fourth story, Lewis tells how he and Gracia Michelle, the wife of the late Nelson Mandela, are taken to a sibling-headed household in Uganda. Quote, there were 5 children in all, 3 girls, 14, 12, and 10, and 2 boys, 11 and 8. We entered the modest hut with our backs to the wall, Gracia with her arm around the 3 girls on her right, and I with my arm around the 2 boys on my left. Gracia then told all the hangers-on to leave, all the media, all the UN staff, except for 1 translator and 1 local worker. And I had no idea what was coming. Gracia turned to the 2 older girls and a most gentle, reassuring voice asked, have you started to menstruate yet? The 2 little girls, clearly startled, replied in those shy, barely audible voices so characteristic of African children, yes. Then Gracia began to ask a series of questions. Do you know what it means? Have you talked with anyone about it? Do you talk with the villagers, your teachers, your fellow students? Does anyone bring you any pads? The atmosphere was intense. The little girls, now fully embraced in Gracia's arms, seemed to have suspended breathing, and I suddenly understood that I was witness to the first act of mothering that these girls had ever received about one of the most transfiguring experiences of a young girl's life. I've told this story a number of times because the experience had a profound impact on me. At the moment that Gracia asked her questions, I thought to myself, that's what's happening right across the continent. The transfer of love and knowledge and values and experience from one generation to the next is gone. And with it goes the confidence and security and sense of place which children normally take for granted. Children already traumatized by the death of their parents are left reeling as they confront the void in the aftermath. As we were leaving, I asked the older sister, who puts you to bed at night? I put everyone to bed, she replied. But bedtimes can be pretty scary, I offered. The nights are dark. The dreams can be upsetting. Don't any of the neighbors come in to help? No, she said matter-of-factly. I put them to bed myself. I'm the mother, end of quote. And so what I was really trying to do there is to take it out of the numbers and the kind of the head part of it and get it into the human side of what that is. And we want to do this in and around getting money out of politics too, with whatever are the most relevant stories. The bottom line is, last October, 2 House Republicans and 2 House Democrats stood on a stage in Lyon, France, at the replenishment meeting for the Global Fund and announced that the US Congress was committed to a 16% increase instead of a 29% cut. And in fact, that was what was enacted and signed into law for this year, a 16 increase from 1.35 billion to 1.56 billion. Now the president's called for a 58% cut for next year, but the work continues. And so I'm going to leave you with one other story related to this. And this is the story. And this is, I love this story. Along with this is Margaret Smith of the Dallas Results Chapter, along with, quote, along with everyone else on this conference call, the Dallas Results Group has worked all year on the Global Fund effort. Dallas is the point person responsibility for our Texas senators. So when I saw Senator Cruz at his coffee on lobby day, I immediately went up to him to shake his hand. Having heard from Results often to not let go until you get your entire laser talk done, I grabbed him with both hands. He listened very intently and said he would look into it. I'm sure it helped that Eloise Sutherland had just handed him over 70 letters she had collected. We met with his foreign policy aide after the coffee and had previously met with his North Texas district director about the Global Fund replenishment. All year, our point person was sending media that was produced throughout Texas, more than 25 letters to the editor, op-eds, and editorials supporting the Global Fund. There were more than 40 meetings with Texas members of Congress or their staff. I must say, we were all floored when Senator Cruz co-sponsored the Senate Global Fund resolution. Senator Cruz has never co-sponsored anything or signed any letter due to our asks. Maybe this can be a turning point in our relationship with him, end of quote. So if our voices as citizens can make such a profound difference on big issues, why don't more of us get involved? Our powerlessness. And Francis Moore Lepay, who wrote Diet for a Small Planet, next year is the 50th anniversary, but in a more recent book wrote, our real problem is not a heating planet, rampant malnutrition, and I'm going to add our money in politics too much. We only have one real problem, our own feelings of powerlessness to manifest the solutions right in front of our noses. Our real problem is not a heating planet or rampant malnutrition or too much money in politics. We only have one real problem, our own feelings of powerlessness to manifest the solutions right in front of our noses. And I say that the gift of my work with Civic Courage is coaching organizations to create structures of support that can dissolve those feelings of powerlessness. I'm going to move on a little bit. Here's a common view of most groups doing advocacy work that's really not up for thawing the resignation. I was talking to the head of organizing, this is 5 years ago, of a national group. You would know them really well. They're really well known. And he said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Well, so much for thawing the resignation. And I always use the Citizen Climate Lobby example where last year their volunteers had 4,305 letters to the editor, op-eds, and editorials published. One group saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. We can't let them write letters. The others saying, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right and give that to them? and as a result, generating 4,300 letters, op-eds, and editorials in 1 year. I'm going to take 1 second on this. Typically, how this structure of support works is there's a monthly conference call where all the chapters, maybe some listen to the recording another night, but all the chapters get together, in this case on Zoom, with a guest speaker, Q&A, maybe a grassroots victory in the ballpark of the one I just read from the woman in Texas with Senator Cruz or something in that neighborhood, with a monthly action sheet and a letter that the group's writing, but then a second meeting to plan the meeting with Congress, or to plan a meeting with an editor, all on Zoom, let's say, or to plan some kind of online outreach event, or some other kind of activity. This is the end of the final couple of slides. One aspect of the civic courage process is a spiritual approach to politics, a politics of love. And I would normally read, and I'm not going to read right now, this little excerpt. I think we may do it next session, from Ellie Sparks, where she starts with suffering from what she calls climate trauma and ends up going to 20 congressional meetings and calls the experience sacred and profound. And we'll get into that another time. This is a citizen climate lobby volunteer who said, quote, Tom Moyer, a CCL volunteer who worked with former Representative Mia Love, Republican of Utah, said, it's impossible to convince anyone of anything if you fundamentally don't like them. If you walk in thinking they're an idiot and evil, you're done from the start. It doesn't matter how logical your position is. You have to put yourself in a place where you can find something to respect in them. So one last time, you can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen. You probably, my newbies, you probably haven't because of your sense of powerlessness, especially around federal politics and politics in general. And number three, if you find an organization committed to dissolving the powerlessness, you can make that profound difference. And then I usually give people, I'm going to skip this, you could join Results or American Promise or CCL, places where they could go, ideas. And I say, basically, you're looking for an organization that can help you move out of your comfort zone and over to where the magic happens. Move out of your comfort zone, like, oh, it's comfortable not writing a letter to the editor. What if I get it wrong? Or it's comfortable not meeting with that member of Congress or whatever. What if, I don't know, what if they yell at me or something? No, if we move out of our comfort zone, that's where the magic happens. And I'll close with this quote from George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Sorry, one more time. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it for whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. End of quote. Thank you very much. And I think I came in under 25 minutes for sure.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. I mean, there's so much to be said, and obviously we're going to touch on a few of those points. So I think that the only, we just have one question, which I really would like to hold until, from Betsy, which I'd like to hold until the Q&A, because I think we're maybe touch on a little bit of it in our discussion of the main messages. So Vicki and I would like to discuss a few key points from the book as they relate to our experiences in our advocacy work. And Vicki, how about if we start with the passage that you chose first?
Sure. A passage that resonated with me was on page 140 about Marjorie Trifon's description of her feelings as she prepared to make a call to the editorial board at her paper in Columbia, South Carolina, to ask them to write an editorial about the need for increased US funding to end childhood hunger. It was her first action with media. Her regional coordinator, Kathy, asked her, and she agreed to make the call even though she was afraid. But really, I was terrified that I would say something stupid, Marjorie said, and the editorial writer would laugh at me. I sat at that desk and wrote out what Kathy said. I'd pick up the telephone, dial the number, hear the ringing, and then hang up as quick as I could. Maybe what I needed was a cup of coffee first. I'd grind the beans, give myself a treat, and then study the packet again. Then I would walk into the bathroom, comb my hair, touch up my makeup. Maybe if I looked right, the phone call would go smoothly. I'd call Kathy and wait for her to call me back. I couldn't do this alone. I did this routine for a couple of days, just trying to build up the courage. When she finally called, she spoke to an assistant who told her that she would have to call back again the next morning to speak with Mr. Krell on the editorial board. She goes through a similar enactment of her procrastination due to her nerves, but she makes the call and he agrees to consider a packet of info about the issue. So she went on to say, I went home and waited for him to call. A week went by, the silence was deafening. I wondered if he'd think I was too pushy if I called him back. I wondered if he'd forget if I didn't. Calling back was as tough as making the first call. He answered the phone and I asked if he remembered the packet I'd brought the week before. Yes, he said. I'm calling to see if the paper's going to run an editorial, I told him. It's in the pipeline, he answered. I had no idea what he was talking about. But what does that mean you're going to write it, I asked. I've already written it, he said, but I don't know when it's going to run. Could I call you later to find out, I asked. Yes, he answered. If it hasn't run in a few days, call me. Every morning I grabbed the newspaper. I couldn't turn to the editorial page fast enough. When it wasn't there, my stomach tightened. The day it was finally in, I was stuttering with excitement. I called my sister. I called Kathy. I called the results office. I kept reading the editorial over and over. I got 3 phone calls that night from others in Columbia who were watching the paper for me, end quote. So the idea of pushing past your comfort zone, Sam, how does taking that step lead to the magic happening?
Well, I think everyone on this call has had their own version of what you were reading about. I don't know, the first letter you wrote to Congress, the first phone call you made, these are maybe little steps looking back.
Sam, let's take you off of the pin. I'm going to take you off being pinned, and let's see by a raise of hands.
Good.
What people have to say. Anybody have that happen? Anybody have the regrinding the beans and putting the makeup on and hanging up the phone because you're like, oh, I can't talk to them this time. I gotta try again.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah. And we all have something right now that is the next one for us. Meaning we did it here, we did it there, and now we have our new one. And I don't know what it is. I think that's the challenge at the end of the call, where I don't know if you want to even mention it, but that challenging us to say, well, what is that called, in this case, the editorial writer? The results' issue of global poverty was typically a low back burner issue. And so when he said it's in the pipeline, that usually meant that the editorial board went home on Friday and they had already stacked up the editorial for Saturday's paper, Sunday's paper, and Monday's paper. And it was in some kind of pipeline that was going to be that way. Yeah, so I think we all have that. And the question is, that experience, the question is, do we have a support team around us? An advocacy team that's encouraging us on, kind of thing, to take that next step. Is the organization giving us an opportunity to take that next step by encouraging us with different actions?
Great.
Thanks.
So I have a separate anecdote that I'm going to another excerpt that I'm going to go over. It pertains to challenges that we've all encouraged as to how to initiate a relationship with a legislator who does not support limiting money out of politics, or how to attempt to repair a soured relationship with a legislator or person of influence. And this is from page 115. This story about Steve Volk. So I'm going to summarize a little bit because it's sort of long. It's long to read the whole entire thing, but it's an anecdote describing the relationship with a newly elected, very conservative congressman in Georgia by the name of Pat Swindle. And the results group that Steve Volk had was going to have a first meeting with him shortly after he was elected. So they went and had their practice meeting before the meeting with the member of Congress. And those of you who have done the training or been to NCLC all know about our nice little protocol for how we all get together and practice what we're going to say and who's going to do the ask and who's going to do the follow-up and whatever. But there was a member of the 4 that went who didn't make it to the practice meeting, and he was a bit of a loose cannon. So he decided that this bill about signing for famine relief in Ethiopia, he decided to take on the congressman about how the congressman should support cutting the military budget in order to fund this particular famine relief bill, which, as you can imagine, didn't go over very well with the conservative congressman, and he became very defensive. And in fact, 2 weeks later, when the bill came up to the floor, he was one of only 15 congressmen of the 435 who voted against the famine relief bill. So not only did they not get his support when they were there in the office with him, he actually voted against it. So they were embarrassed. They felt like they were ashamed that he was their congressman. This is a waste of time. Why are we even going to bother go talk to him? And we all know that we've had kind of some of these feelings about some of the really dyed-in-the-wool anti-campaign finance reform legislators that we deal with. So the story goes on that Sam had spoken to Steve about maybe what they could do to take a different approach. And he suggested an actual prayer that another results volunteer had written for their congressperson, basically asking God to have open their hearts to seeing this congressman as somebody who really didn't want people to see people suffer, and find their compassion for someone who finds it difficult to deal with people who think differently than they do, like most of us do at times. So they did that, and they found that they were.
Could I just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
They would read the prayer at their meeting, and they'd go, "Yeah, right." And then they'd read their prayer at their next meeting, and they'd go, "Fat chance." But eventually, sorry, it sunk in.
It came around. So that's what I'm going to read part where he came around. So we eventually let go of our negative attitude towards Pat. Instead, we began to see him as a human being who, just like us, did not want to see people dying in the world from hunger and disease. All he needed was a little education. We began to show up at Chat with Pat sessions around the district. There were other people with other issues in the district who had bones to pick with him. We jokingly called the sessions Spat with Pat. And whenever they did, they didn't get anywhere. If anything, he stiffened his resolve and defended his position. When he got around to us, he was visibly relieved to see us, greeting him with a handshake and a smile instead of a scowl and a sharp tongue. Then we would give him a 2-minute briefing on an issue that we were concerned about at the time. And when we started talking about enabling a farmer to grow a ton of wheat for a full year for the same amount of money that it would cost to send a ton of wheat one time, Well, then he started listening a little closer, and gradually we had a relationship of trust and respect. So they then have 2 years after the initial souring of the relationship, another piece of legislation, and they decide that they feel like they can approach him and have a meeting with him in his office again and ask him to co-sponsor. And they think that they might have actually developed enough of a relationship to get him to co-sponsor. And the Steve, the leader, says, you know, if he says he's going to co-sponsor, I'm going to ask him if he'll write an op-ed. And his cohort in the volunteers is like, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. So they have a very smooth meeting with him. And they say, well, you know, Congressman, do you think you could co-sponsor this piece of legislation? He says, absolutely. And before Steve could even get out of his mouth about what you think about, he says, and you know, I think that a media piece is really important to build public support on this issue. So how about if you write an op-ed for me? I have the column in the paper regularly, and we can put that in the paper to build public support for this issue. And Steve then goes on to describe, I glanced over at Sarah with a smile so wide that it hurt. Pat, I'd be more than happy to do it, he said. I was now ghostwriting for a man who 2 years earlier voted against famine aid for Ethiopia. We were probably the only lobbying group in Georgia that could get Pat Swindell, a conservative, and liberal Congressman John Lewis to co-sponsor the same legislation. That experience changed me. I now see that everyone has the potential to do the right thing if given the opportunity. It's refreshing to see people as possibilities rather than obstacles. So Sam, in these days of political polarization, we know that citizens widely across partisan support limiting money in politics, but it's an issue that is opposed by conservative lawmakers for ideology reasons, I guess, for many reasons, but we are not getting the movement from the conservative lawmakers that we need to get to be able to advance a constitutional amendment. So we know that we need to approach these lawmakers with an open mind and thank them for something, even if it's just that they support the booster club at the football, you know, for football at the high school. And that's the only thing we can congratulate them on or thank them for. But what else can we do to increase our chances of influencing these lawmakers?
Okay, great. So I want to say that I know there are people on this call who have done that or inched significantly in the direction with your own members. So I want to acknowledge that up front. So let me give some, you know, I've done mini trainings where, let's say, I'm American Promise and you all are my conservative congressperson opposed, that I would have people write down 3 questions. First question is, I know you don't support this measure. What would it take to change your mind? Listen, listen, listen. Can you say more about that? Listen, listen. Why do you think that is? So it's a profound listening session in terms of getting, so that's one. Number 2, asking the member of Congress, state legislature, or their staff, who is it that has a big influence on the elected official? Is it a religious leader? And I don't mean it's one person. Is it a religious leader? Is it a business leader who's significant in this community? Is it the mayor or several mayors? Is it the Chamber of who is it that if they came on board, the member of Congress would listen more intently?
Right.
And I'll do one more. This whole notion, and if I'm looking for something to thank my congressperson or whomever state legislator for, I would go on their website and look at their news releases. What is it that they've put out a news release touting that they're so proud of? And can I find something in that long list of news release that I could honestly and legitimately thank them for? And so in that manner, letters to the editor written saying that Representative so-and-so, I mean, I really applaud Representative so-and-so's leadership on X. I hope she can bring the same kind of leadership on the issue of, you know, our dealings with the profusion of money in politics. So legitimately finding something that they sing, that sings for them, that we actually could embrace too. I mean, they may have 20 things and we can embrace one of them, but find that one and kind of acknowledge that one publicly with the hope that they could bring that same kind of leadership to this issue.
Great.
So.
Great. And I think one thing you and Vicki and I had spoken about this a little bit on Sunday, and we had said too, to try to be in tune, if possible, with some of the trigger terms that may really set off opposition immediately if you use them. Like for a conservative, they don't want to hear about Citizens United's Supreme Court case. They just, that's a liberal thing. Like that's fine. No problem. That's First Amendment. That's not going to get you anywhere with them. Or Vicki, you had said just even to say we're a democracy.
Yeah, sometimes they're, you know, right away that'll turn somebody off saying we're not a democracy, you know, we're a republic. And then you're on a completely different subject and you can't get back and they've dismissed you already. So, and that, I know that sounds really weird, but people get really defensive about that. So we have a democratic process. That's what our democratic process is at risk. And I would use that term rather than saying our democracy is at risk.
Right.
You know, I know that's weird, but we got to play with the hand we've been dealt. So.
Yeah. And some of that, I mean, we can, I think with our new, hopefully with our new communications person coming in, maybe we can get a little bit more training on the framing and the language that we know of a few of these things, but maybe there are other things that we need to be a little bit more in tune with when we're talking to, to some of the more conservative legislators. So I want to be,
Marie, let me just actually too, John Pudner, who we work with Take Back Our Republic, who's a conservative, he said that if you're worried about a term or you're not sure if it's seen as a political term or not, you should not Google it. Go in as not yourself. I don't know what they call that, where you go in on the protected thing so it can't give you information of what your history, with your history, the algorithms, choosing what you get to see, and do research that way and see if it comes up, in a different way than you expect it to. So that's a good way to do it. So
that's interesting.
Let's see if we can open it up to others.
Yeah, I want to be mindful of the time, and we're definitely going to address. We'll call questions out of the chat, and also people, we can ask for people to raise their hands. But first, I just want to show everybody, in case people have to get off. I want to show you the Leaders Challenge to get out of your comfort zone. What are we talking about there? So that you're mindful of what that is. It will be in the follow-up email as well, but just so you see that. So here's our personal action plan, challenge to leave your comfort zone. What have you hesitated to attempt in your advocacy because you feel unqualified or you fear a negative response? It could be something as simple as writing a letter to the editor. It could be something a little bit more difficult, like trying to get a meeting with your conservative lawmaker, or trying to start a resolution, depending on where you are in your advocacy work. Pick an action outside of your comfort zone and think about a plan of how you can get yourself over that obstacle to get started on it. And we're going to follow up on these in the next session, and bonus points if you actually take the action or start to take the action. Okay.
And I would add, get some support. If it's something you do need a little training on, get some training. If you just need a buddy to report back to on or practice with, and then tell I'm going to do it tomorrow and report back how it went, don't do it alone.
Yeah. All right. So I think Betsy had put a question in the chat a while ago. She said, and it was a little bit to what we discussed with moving a politician that but I think address the emotional part. How can we move politicians on anti-corruption issues like they can be moved on global poverty? And Betsy, if you want to unmute yourself, were you talking about that emotional connection?
No, it's a story with Ted Cruz. It was this Ted Cruz story that it was leaning into, and I asked that question, before that kind of got all told. But I find that, and I mean, it's maybe for me, it's a bit of a rhetorical question. But, if you undo anti-corruption for a politician, that really affects them. And why would they agree to do it? It's like the fox and the hen house kind of story kind of thing. Whereas global poverty is something that maybe is more abstract and pulls at the heartstring and, kind of gets you in a different kind of way. And why wouldn't you actually, at the end of the day, agree to that?
Well, I think
so that's what I'm kind of getting at. What's how do you position that?
Well, I think sometimes it can be helpful, and Sam, obviously you're going to say more, but sometimes it can be helpful to ask them, well, how does this affect you? Like, I know many of us have had the response that I spend hours upon hours dialing for dollars for donors, or I get primaried by people who are bringing money in from out-of-state donors, or it's, for the business, Susan Muller is on somewhere in our gallery, and she's our Business American Promise coordinating director, I guess you would say, and she's leading the network presentation next week and talking about how it's anti-competitive to business and the free marketplace. So you have to kind of hit them where they live, find what matters to them, and find a story about that. And the personal story, I think, makes a difference.
Let me just add this. We were talking about this the other day, and someone may know this story better than I did. I think it was President Johnson who was saying to some advocacy group, it might have been civil rights leaders, I agree with you. Now go make me do it. Build the kind of support where I have to do it. And so it gets back to there a bit too. How is it that it becomes the issue that it deserves to be? In my case, not in an angry way, but there. Who are the community leaders that? There's some community leaders that don't have the ear of this particular elected official, and there are other community leaders who do have the ear of this particular elected official. I would focus a bit more over there if I want to get through to the elected official. But, where are those levers of influence that, would get their attention and quote unquote turn them around? I mean, bottom line is they want to get reelected. So is there something with the newspaper? Is there something with community leaders? Is there something with relationship, us with them? What are those various levers that we could use?
Marie.
So yeah, I'm just looking, Renee had a good comment. That's not really a question.
Why don't we just let people
Well, that's too, Sam. Renee's question is she works with nonprofits. So Renee, you want to unmute and ask Sam your question?
You're still muted.
Is she here?
She may not be.
Okay, yeah, maybe she's gone. And then Artist had her hand up. Artist, will you want to unmute and ask a question?
Actually, I was just going to report on our breakout session. So it's whatever I was going to say is moot. But I will say that I'm appreciating this discussion. And I'm a few steps along the way in this comfort level business, but I think that I think I'm ready to skip the Wright County Commissioners, Vicky, and go directly to Joe and Bruce, because I put this question in front of them at the forum before the election. And maybe I can get Renee to buddy up with me and go directly to the House instead of bothering with the commissioners, although there are 2 new commissioners now. So
Well, we also have
Challenge.
Mark from Buffalo is on the call with us tonight too. So maybe we can talk to Mark about that.
yeah,
Artist.
Great.
Do you want to just let anyone unmute themselves if they have a
Ashwari-
question?
Ashwari has her hand up.
Go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Sam, my question is about really the times, because we are in what feels to me like unprecedented times where there is so much deception, like outright deception going on. And I mean, what are your thoughts on how it's not only that, like, say, a congressperson that I might be approaching I might need to find how this would be good for them, or find a way that they, to build a relationship. But it's kind of like, in some ways, there are a lot of our officials are morally, really, I don't know what to say, deception.
The word is bankrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, how do we deal with that? I mean, do you have any?
Well, let me just say a couple of things, and I don't really want to be the expert, but if we were 4 years ago, I would have asked you how many people who were eligible to vote 4 years ago didn't vote. I just got goosebumps on the back of my neck. It's like 100 million. And I don't know if this time, I don't know what the numbers are. If the answer is the number that are old enough to vote but didn't vote this time is not 100 million. It was only 75 million. I have no idea what the final number would be, but the asleepedness is almost overwhelming. And so Ram Dass used to tell this quick story of when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he can see are the pockets. When a pickpocket meets a saint, all he can see are the pockets. Well, all I can see is organizing. All I can see is waking people up. You know, if I've got a team of 4, how do I get it to 8? If I've got a team of 8, how do I get it to 12? If I got a team of 12, how do I get it to 20? And then how do I get folks going through comfort zones, and they're reaching out to some business people, and they're reaching out to some newspapers, and they're reaching out to some religious leaders or whatever it is. So it's worry. Yeah, what you said. Yeah. What can we do about it? You know, whenever a pickpocket meets a saint, all he can see are his pockets. When an organizer meets the kind of things you've described, all I can see is better organizing, waking people up so that you don't get away with it, in a sense. I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Monica has her hand raised.
Yeah, it's for a comment that, Sam, some of the things that you spoke to us when we had a session at a library about a year ago, I guess, right? And one of the things you showed, and it's even, you know, it ties in and it's here in this presentation too, but I think you did it a little bit different way in that presentation, was taking the argument down to the very emotional level with people. And, you know, like you did here, you say, you don't really want to see people starve, do you? You know, everyone can agree with them. It's almost worked with people. It gets them, even in this environment, it will get them, they can agree with you on that point. And, you know, it's like a little breaking of the ice, but I would have to say that in this environment, it doesn't take them much longer, a few more seconds, and they're back to the, you know, Democrats are all, you know, liars and this and that kind of, but it has been one, you know, it has been one thing that has almost gone through to people. So it's better than nothing.
The
Well, I guess the sense I'm getting in terms of the question I asked is maybe the investment in building that relationship. It may be, as you were saying, Sam, and which is also what American Promise is kind of suggesting, is with this networks thing, it is instead of expecting to reach that person directly, to find out who has their ear and do just as much work on building that relationship. And it's just a mind-boggling investment of energy to think about stepping back and stepping back and stepping back to form these bridges or these links, but maybe that's the way to reach somebody like that. So they don't even necessarily know it's you.
But even in the story, the anecdote that I picked out, it was a 2-year gap of, you know, unfortunately a misstep to begin with, but then a 2-year working on, you know, contacting him and showing up at the local coffee chats. Now that's a problem because back in '87, a lot of lawmakers did that. And unfortunately now there are a lot of lawmakers who don't even do that. Maybe, well, COVID, maybe they do it on Zoom, but maybe, you know, some of them don't even have that access. So yeah, there's a lot of other contacts and touches that have to happen. Nancy's got her hand up.
Yeah, my question to Sam is, and unlike Ashwari, I think actually this is a pretty exciting time when you look at Hedrick Smith and the people power and all the states that have overturned, have redistricting and the focus on democracy reform. My question to Sam I'm a results person, and I also do support a CCL. Results that you've been working on that for 45 years, it's really well established. CCL is doing amazingly well in terms of the number of people that they have on their calls. And so results is struggling a little bit in terms of finding activists. Well, in this environment, so many people are working on the elections, but is there something more difficult about the issue of money in politics that makes it more difficult to engage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether it's climate change and there's the one side and the other at the moment, or whether it's money in politics, there's the one side or the other. Global poverty, there isn't so much the one side or the other. Maybe on certain domestic poverty approaches, there might be the one side or the so it's a harder issue, absolutely. But again, things shift, you know, and they shift because people organize and, you know, help make them shift. You know, I'm thinking of gay marriage as an example of a recent shift that was once, you know, it was pretty one way or the other kind of thing. And yeah, so yeah.
I think too, Jeff said,
go ahead.
And Jeff said at our session, actually 2 years ago now, the National Citizen Leadership Conference, which really brought my, you know, kind of opened my eyes with it, was that no other amendment process has started with such widespread support in terms of the citizens supporting, cross-partisan and widespread citizen support. Usually it was decades to get that to happen, and then they started an amendment, you know, while they were trying to get the amendment. And we are lucky enough to work with a situation where the citizens support what we want.
Yeah. Marie, I'll send my slides to you.
Okay.
That you might send out to folks if anyone's interested. But I think maybe we could end with this quote, which I skipped in my presentation. Alex Steffen, a futurist and climate activist, and I'm going to read it twice as is my want. Optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who think nothing's going to get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face with money and politics and still insist that we can solve those problems. Optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who think nothing's going to get any better. In fact, I love this. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist that we can solve those problems. Yay.
So
Alex
powerful.
Steffen.
So
I'll
powerful.
send this after and you can send it to folks, which will include that and then some of the other quotes I included.
Great. Do we have a minute for, Judy has had her hand up. Judy, can we see, do you still have a question?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to point out that in some ways, I feel like the fact that the Democrats outraised the Republicans this time is actually in our favor. I'm finding that there's a softening on the other side. There's a huge amount of resentment about out of state money flowing in on local issues among Republicans. We managed to get 5 Republicans. I've never gotten any Republicans to sign on to this before, but 5 candidates signed our pledge this summer. And our leadership team is meeting tomorrow morning, and we're going to figure out, 2 of them won their elections. And we're going to figure out how we're going to approach them and keep them in the game and see if we can expand their influence in their party.
And you're in Delaware, Judy?
Yes,
Yeah, awesome.
Do you want to
By
give
the
us,
country.
there you go. You want to give us our homework again?
Oh yeah, let's give you your homework again. And Sam, there's a question in this chat about,
Yeah.
is it okay to share the slides on social media?
On social media, I mean, I don't know that they'll mean much
Yeah.
to people.
Right.
I think that I'm sorry I asked that question. I think
you
that
want-
the last quote that you just put up.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
You shared one slide, whatever it is, that's fine. The whole thing wouldn't mean much to people.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
no, I said that some of
absolutely, sure.
So here's our homework again. What have you hesitated to attempt in your advocacy work because you feel unqualified or fear a negative response? Pick an action outside your comfort zone and develop a plan to achieve it, and bonus points if you tell us how you took that action by December 2nd.
And I just want to point out too that I remember that it doesn't have to be like contacting a legislator or elected official. You could contact your neighbor who's had an opposing yard sign in their yard for every election for the past few years, and you've stopped talking to him since then. You could do that too.
Yep, that puts us outside of our comfort zone for a large.
Can I make a quick offering? As a therapist and coach, if you begin developing a plan to achieve it and you realize that your very first step is pretty daunting, break it down, develop a plan to take that very first step, just tiny, be realistic, set yourself up for
we're not suggesting that
success.
you should be able to report that you've started, a county-wide resolution or something. If you think you're up for that, and that's really been the next thing that you've been hesitating to do, please make a plan to do that. But if it could be something like, oh, I don't feel comfortable sending in a letter to the editor submission because who would want to read what I have to say? That's a step outside your comfort zone. That qualifies, because one step leads to another. So, all right, everybody, I think
Thank
we'll
you, everyone.
end tonight, and I'll be
Thank you.
sending up a recap email. And thanks so much.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you for coming.
you.
See you in a couple
Sam.
weeks.
Bye all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great job. Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mark.
Bye, thanks.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks.
I'm going to go send the slides to you and go watch Durrells of Corfu with my wife.
Okay, sounds good, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. That was fantastic.
Okay, I
Thank
loved
you
it.
so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
That's funny.
Ah,
So I'm pleased. I think it went off well.
yeah, I think so.
Laura, you're an impartial observer.
Oh, you guys did great.
Or Susan's still on. What'd you think, Susan?
Or not.
Or not? There you go. Yeah, not all of the staff hung around for the whole thing.
Well, Marnie was on to the end, so that must mean that Jessica.
Oh,
got
that's
off.
good.
But
Yeah,
she's got little kids, so.
Yeah.
Kindergarten,
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right, twins.
twins in kindergarten, so yeah.
Let me
My
see.
husband brought me in a glass of wine.
Oh, you are smart. I didn't do that. I had my
I
coffee.
told him about 9:15, come in with a glass of wine.
Oh, delivery even.
Are you in a
And he
hotel?
kept the dogs quiet, so woo.
Yeah, are you in a hotel, Ricky?
No. Oh, that's the Brady Bunch
Brady Bunch house.
living room behind me. It's a screensaver or a
Oh,
virtual background.
Okay, like she's in the lobby.
Marsha. Yeah, we had a pretty good crowd. I mean, with 41, and
Yeah.
a couple of people from Minnesota came in right at 8 our time, so they got the time changed.
Yeah, I put Eastern Standard Time, but they probably
Yeah,
just
and,
didn't.
you know, so that's okay. It was recorded, so
Yeah.
gosh, Sam is just fantastic. I just
It was great.
yeah. So
I needed, as I said, Laura, with the op-ed, his op-ed from yesterday, that just reading that was just so, like I get goosebumps from.
Yeah.
I know. I sent it out and said it. He did it again. I can't believe how good it is. It's just so good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
I'm trying to.
And I think, I think everything will be. I think everything will be fine for us. As an organization, I just don't know how I'm going to get together with people again. And a lot of the answers that Sam is giving is, get a partner and do it with other people. And that for me is the question of the year, since March. So
I know we all feel that. We do. I mean, it's
yeah. And that's been the beauty of the coffee and chat stuff. I mean, I think we all would have just folded.
I agree. I can't even imagine if we didn't have that. I can't imagine.
There would not have been 10% of what we did this year without that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's surprising. I reread his email to you, Marie, and he does say he wants you to be empowered, as a leader. So I mean, I know that means.
Did Jeff get back? Did Jeff get back?
Yeah, he had emailed Marie.
I only saw what Nancy.
I'll forward you the other ones.
Oh yeah, I emailed him too, and but yeah, I just still don't feel like he gets it. I don't understand how we can explain it any further than we have. I mean, I told him in my email, Laura, I told him we're bleeding members. I mean, we've been telling people this all year long.
Yeah.
All different people. Every one of them.
Well, I'm gonna have a call with Nancy. I can't do tomorrow, and I'm sorry I haven't been more available because I have this.
Well, you're in the middle of
construction.
Yeah, you got stuff going on.
But I planned it this way. I plan to work myself to death and then collapse the week before the election and then do the construction. So it's just this 3
You're
more
right on
weeks.
schedule. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I sent a welcome letter and little summary of what we've been up to over to Gregory, the new communications guy, having seen him in person.